Good morning, everyone. Thank you very much for joining. This is Rabia from Merck Training and Consulting, and I'd like to welcome you for this webinar on designing individual development plans. Just before we go as scheduled in 2 minutes, if you would possibly be able to send me through the chat a confirmation that you can see my slides and you can hear my voice, see the camera as well. That would be great, so we can make sure that technically we are ready to go. That's great. That's great. Thank you very much. So the topic itself, as the name tells, is mainly a human resources topic, a talent management topic, and specifically a learning and development topic. So I would maybe assume that most of you are within this area of profession. So just to make sure, I try to get to know you a little bit without wasting your time. If you can type in your current job or your current title and organization, this way it would help me to at least further customize the discussion towards your endeavors. That would be very good as well. That's great. So we have some people from operations and we have some people from HR, and that's fantastic, in fact, because the topic involves both both of you. It's very important to know that none of the HR initiatives would really be successful without a real partnership between the designers of initiatives which sit in the HR department and the line managers, who are really the main followers on the implementation and those who really reap the benefits of such initiatives. Certainly, when we work in human resources, we aim as much as we can to facilitate the progression of our organization towards their objectives. And certainly, if we will not be able to partner with line managers, then those initiatives will only remain nice PowerPoint presentations and will be unfortunately doomed for not to succeed. So in these webinars that we offer in Merck on a regular basis, we usually try to go on a very practical end. So we would really like that out of this 1 hour, you really take something out. You really get at least a flavor of what we're talking about with some hands-on practice that you might be able to go and use right away. The topic is not generic; it's very specified, and it is a topic that requires a certain set of skills that most of us might know some, might miss some. So that's why we're gonna put it all together, and without much of theoretical perspectives on that, we'd like to be hands-on as much as we can and as much as time would allow us. I would again thank everyone who's joining right now. And please, at any point in time, if you have any questions, feel free to type it in on the chat, and I will make sure that during the last part of our discussion, I will manage to answer your questions. So this webinar, as you know, is presented by Merck Training and Consulting. And for those of you who we are having the chance to serve for the first time with our solutions, a quick brief about our organization. So Merck Training and Consulting has been founded in 1958. So it's our 63rd year in the market, and that's mainly because of the trust of our clients, because of their belief that we can partner on the development of their employees. And thank God, the company has been doing amazingly in terms of the portfolio growth, in terms of the geographical spread, and certainly with the launch of the virtual learning, which we had some adventures in since 2011. We have launched this virtual learning platform. We have designed our own methodology and approach towards delivering highly interactive live training sessions. And proudly, in 2020, our team of consultants have delivered more than 1,200 training days through the virtual learning for both in-company groups and public, in addition to some online snippets, which are short skill-based seminars that we offer online as well. We have a great team joining. So far, we're around 20 people, and that's very nice. Allow me again to introduce myself very quickly. My name is Rabia. I'm from Lebanon. I work with Merck Training and Consulting as a senior consultant, mainly in technical HR and leadership development and human resources consultancy. I've had the chance to work with magnificent clients in the GCC region as in talent development management, in L&D management, and I had also the chance to teach in some universities for master students. In terms of academic achievements, I have a master's in education, another one in human resources and training, and currently pursuing my level 7 diploma in NCIP. So that's in a nutshell. And let's go directly towards discussing our topic. So as I mentioned before, please feel free at any point in time to pop your questions in the chat so we can discuss them whenever the time is right. For those of you who would like to take some notes, please feel free to do so. That will be very helpful. Although for those interested, we will share the slides with you once we finish this webinar. And if you have an interest of that, I will share my email address so we can be in touch later on. So when we talk about individual development plans, certainly that's a tool that could be part of many frameworks in talent management, in career development, in learning and development, in performance improvement programs, any kind of initiative. And it's, as we said, a set of elements that come together to provide the development track for some of our employees. So to begin with, let's define what an individual development plan is. So as defined in practice, it's a unique blend of learning activities aiming at developing the competencies of employees to fulfill their performance objectives and career aspiration. And here, if you allow me, I would like to highlight some of the key words in this definition. So what are the key words that I would really like to highlight? First of all, it is unique. Why it is unique? Because it is individual. And since learning is very contextual, it is individual based, it is focused on the learner preferences. Certainly, although it might have some similarities with other people fulfilling the same role, it will be unique in its own terms. Another one or another keyword that I would like to highlight is the keyword blend. Why we're talking about blend? Because an individual development plan is not a series of training courses. Okay. Now, a series of training courses is more like a curriculum or like an academic path, and it doesn't by itself serve as a development plan. Very few people will be able, without a blend of other methodologies, to take the learning from a generic course down the way towards the implementation and the competency development. So that's why we cannot really rely solely on courses and assume that by attending a course, then the learning and the competency development will happen automatically. This is unfortunately not true, and that's why we need partners in this process to ensure that the development is happening. Otherwise, we could all have been very healthy because we watch a movie on diet, or we watch someone else doing exercises, but they will benefit, we will not benefit from that. So it's a blend, and we will talk certainly about how creative we can be in this blend itself. And the main aim is competencies development. So we would like, through this kind of learning journey, to develop specific competencies of the employees. And why we would like to develop those competencies? Mainly because of two reasons. The first reason is to improve their performance further. So if you have an employee that has missed some of their targets or their objectives throughout the year, then individual development plans come in order to bridge the performance gap. On the other hand, if you have some potential successors for key positions in the organization, or you would like to create a pool of talents in the organization where you offer high potential employees opportunities for growth, then you can use as well an individual development plan. Now, a question for you, and if you don't mind, answer me by yes or no on the chat. Do you think in practice, every employee in the organization should have an individual development plan? Yes or no? So I will repeat the question. Do you think that everyone in the organization, every employee in the organization should have an individual development plan? Answers are piling up. I have 6 answers so far. All right. And some people would say yes, some people would say no. As I can see, we have a split of counts. Maybe half of you are saying yes, and the other half is saying no. Yeses are, as it seems, piling up. And certainly, we would wish, to be honest, to have an individual development plan for every employee in the organization. However, ladies and gentlemen, this is not always practically possible. This is not always practically possible. So if, for example, you have an organization of 200 employees or 300 employees, that would be fairly doable. But this would mean that you need a dedicated L&D team member or a talent development team member for this. Now, on the other hand, for an organization with 200 employees or 300 employees only, we know for sure that the possibilities of having a dedicated L&D resource is very minimal. And that's why, although we would wish to really have an IDP for everyone, this sometimes might not be possible from the practical end. I can see a question from Rustam asking about the steps of an IDP, and this is certainly something that is going to come down the road. Rustam, thank you very much for the question. I'll make sure I'll give you an answer as we proceed. So this is the definition of an individual development plan. If you would like to see what the uh, components or ingredients of an individual development plan, there is a very nice model that I adopted from a study by Yale University that describes three ingredients of individual development plans. First, it describes the current level of competencies of a certain uh, individual. So somehow these individuals need to answer three questions. What am I great at? What's important to learn or get better at? And where do I want to be? But this is only one aspect. Another very important aspect of IDPs is also the needs of the organization. I would like to explore my potentials in business development. However, is that decision or aspiration sound for the organization? Would it benefit the organization as well? But we cannot undergo any initiative in learning and development, in talent management, in HR, in totality, without this being serving the needs of the organization. This is simply counterproductive. Everyone is in the organization to serve the organization, and as a win-win for them, then when the organization is successful, everyone will have a fair opportunity for sure. So these are the first two components. Certainly, when it comes to career aspiration, to career development, Yale suggests that adding the passion of the individual is very important by asking the questions, what do I really love doing and what really energizes me? What are the tasks, the responsibilities, the aspirations that I would wake up for on daily basis without the need of continuous external motivation that would that I would require very often, because this way you will make sure that an employee will own their development plan and will proceed fairly quickly and with high levels of commitment towards their development objectives. And I'm pretty sure that the ladies and gentlemen here in the room that work in HR and have been involved in the implementation of individual development plans, they have seen lots of times where individuals get their IDPs, they sign their IDPs, but then unfortunately they don't commit to those IDPs. So ideally, and especially when it is about career aspiration, about career progression, it is very important to understand the internal or intrinsic motivation of employees, or what the Yale University calls the passion itself. So these are the ingredients. Now, in business context, in business context, IDPs take time. They take time to set up the system. They take time for design and development. They take time in implementation, and they consume lots of resources. So that's why in practice, and especially whenever we don't have enough resources to cater IDPs for everyone in the organization, we can dedicate those efforts towards a certain group of employees. Now, here I share three, but it can be a combination of any two or the three of them, or even some groups outside of those three. So, to whom do you dedicate such time, commitment, resources, and money and efforts to design, develop, and implement IDPs? A first choice is for high potential employees. So, for example, if your company is about to grow geographically, vertically, you would like to expand your line of products, you would like to venture in new services, the company is on the hike, then everyone knows that we will soon need people to fill in newly established roles. And those people, instead of going to look outside, some organizations would decide to look inside for high potential employees, discuss their career aspiration, and prepare them in case of any vacancy, so they will be able to jump in and assume the role as fast as possible, and making sure that those roles are fulfilled successfully. So this is one group of employees. Another group of employees where you can spend time on uh, developing, designing, and implementing IDPs is the group of successors of key positions. Now, if a company is facing high turnover at key position level, and this is causing pain for the operation, is maybe destabilizing the sustainability of the business, putting the vital indicators at risk, then certainly the talent management department is responsible for proactively preparing successors for key positions that are at risk. And those or this population is certainly worth the investment for IDP development. A third example is, or a third population are poor performers. If they are jeopardizing the performance of the organization, jeopardizing the high performance culture that you are trying to establish, maybe they are spreading a sense of inequity or a sense of unfairness among their colleagues, or even sometimes giving the bad example and making everyone drop their performance, then poor performance need to be dealt with immediately. And to do that, you need to prepare an emergency IDP where you put those poor performers on a PIP program or on a performance improvement program to make sure that they uh, improve their business outcome as fast as possible and get back on track. So these are some of the examples or populations within the organization to whom we can dedicate an IDP efforts. So this is the IDP in business context. Again, I would like to welcome everyone who is joining. Now we have 25 participants. That's an amazing number. Again, I would like to remind you that if you have any question, please feel free to pop it in the chat, and I will make sure I will answer it in due time. So going back to the process of developing individual development plans, I would suggest two scenarios based on how the IDP is initiated and also based on what kind of infrastructure and what kind of system do you currently have in the organization. So two approaches. The first one is a performance-based approach to develop IDPs. And I'm going to give you certainly examples around both of them. So when we talk about performance, we're talking about an organization that already has a performance management system where every employee is assigned objectives, quantifiable objectives, by the beginning of every fiscal year or every calendar year, toward which they need to progress, assuming or hoping at least that by the end of year they reach the expectations. So when you have this, you start by analyzing those performance gaps. Again, for the population targeted with the IDP initiative. So you start by analyzing the gaps. The gap means I had to answer the complaints and resolve them within 48 hours on average. However, I could only resolve 60% of them with an average of 72 hours. This is a performance gap. I couldn't reach my business objectives. And this means that I am not in a good position. The organization is not in a good position. And that's why there should be an intervention. Now, once you identify those performance gaps, you will need to validate the development needs. And what do we mean by development needs? It means that you need to make sure that the performance gap is due to a competency gap. Again, you need to ensure that the performance gap is due to a competency gap. If the performance is not due to a competency gap, then this is not a development need. Everyone knows that in turbulent markets, some employees might not be able to achieve their objectives. And this is not because they lack competence. This is because there was some circumstances outside of their zone of influence that they could do nothing about it. And here, certainly, the performance managers really know that they need to go back and review those objectives before evaluating employees and identifying performance gaps. But however, once you validate that this development need is, this performance gap is due to a competency gap, then you need to extract those required competencies. You need to somehow rationalize the performance gap. What skills, what knowledge, what behaviors this employee needs to develop in order for next year to reach their aspired targets. This is what we mean by extracting the required competencies. And certainly, when you are discussing, for example, the improvement of performance of a poor performer, you will have lots of competency gaps. And here comes again the practicality of choosing the priorities of the development areas. I cannot assign 7 competencies for one employee to be developed in 1 year. So again, a question for you, just to at least have a little bit of interaction, maybe on the chat, if you don't mind. Would you drop a number of competencies that an employee can focus on developing as a maximum in 1 year? So how many competencies an employee is can usually or should usually develop in 1 year? All right, that's great. I'm going to give you 10 more seconds if someone else has some answers. Mariam, for sure it depends, but that's only an average. But certainly 7 is highly overrated. Now, as everyone is saying, it's 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. I would really say that 4 is a little bit pushed. So 2 to 3, and it all depends on the potential of an employee, because an employee with a medium potential would not be able to develop in 1 year more than 2 competencies. So I would say 1 to 2 for medium potential employees, 2 to 3 in high potential employees. 4 would be a little bit pushed because, as you know, it's you need to make sure that employees are doing their jobs and not only spending their times on development. So this is when you have a performance management system without a competency frame. But if you are lucky enough that your organization has developed a full-fledged technical and behavioral competency framework with definitions and levels and key behavioral indicators for every position in the organization, then your road will be a little bit more simple. So here you just only need to measure the competencies versus the required level per the job, and then you will identify the gaps. Again, setting the priorities to make sure that you focus on what matters most for the business, and finally design the IDP again. Now, a word of caution here, if you don't mind. When you measure competencies, sometimes we assign priority by the by how large the gap is. So, for example, if you are at level 1 and you are required at level 4 on a certain competency 1, and on competency 2 you are required at level 4 but you are at level 3, then most probably you will think that the priority goes for competency number 1, because there are three levels in terms of, or three in difference in terms of the gap. However, this is not always true, and here comes the business alignment. Here comes really the input of the line manager, who would step on and really decide, and it is for him or her to really decide on where to focus upon. Certainly, as an L&D expert or a talent management expert, you can give your opinion. However, the best person to acknowledge the priority and to decide on the development priorities is the line manager, him or herself. So these are the approaches. Now we're gonna take one example of performance-based and 1 or 2 examples of competency-based, just to make sure that we move into the practical end. So what's gonna happen is I'm gonna show you a ready-made example of an IDP for some famously renowned positions. Those were IDPs that I had the chance to develop within my career. They were very well. You will notice some differences in the elements of the template. You can add, you can subtract, depending on how mature you have reached in terms of developing IDPs within the organization. And by maturity, I really mean how well the mindset of IDPs is there, what level of learning organization you have reached, and how cooperative and competent the line managers are in writing those individual development plans. So my first example is going to be a performance-based example for a learning and development manager. And I took a part of his or her objectives that have been assigned in 2020. And as you can see, this kind of template has the initiative or the initial analysis for the input itself. So the first objective is adhering to training budget within 10% range of difference. People who work in L&D are very familiar with such kind of objective. Generate an ROI of 150% on the leadership development program. And certainly, we're assuming that they are running a leadership development program in 2020. Deliver an average of 12 standard learning hours per eligible full-time employee, and deliver 90% of the planned training programs in 2020. These were the objectives of this learning and development manager for 2020. And on the second column, as you can see, we are looking at the achievements. So instead of adhering to between 90 and 100%, this learning manager has to spend 125% of the budget allocated in order to fulfill all the training needs, which means that there is a performance gap. It means he spent a maximum of 35% more than what he had to spend. In terms of the ROI generation, the ROI on the leadership development program was only 70% instead of 150. This is almost 55% behind target, which is significantly below expectations. The number of training hours delivered per eligible full-time employee were 10.5 instead of 12, and 60% of the training plan, the planned programs, have been delivered instead of 90. Now we move to the validation process. So by validation, as you can see, we have three options. Either validated as competency gap, so the performance gap is totally due to a competency gap, and this is the case for objectives 1 and 2. In objective number 3, business urgency prevented target achievement, and this means that the employee is not accountable for not achieving this objective, while in objective number 4, business urgency prevented target achievement only partially. So there is some accountability that goes to the L&D manager, lack of competencies, and some goes to business environment or business context itself. So what are the competencies that might be lacking? And again, this validation and rationalization process is done between the L&D manager, his direct or her direct manager, and people from the L&D department or from the talent management department. And as they sit together to review the performance of the L&D manager, they extract competencies responsible for the gaps. So for the first objective, certainly this manager needs to develop some effective budgeting competency and needs to improve his or her negotiation skills. When it comes to ROI generation, the main reason was the lack of competence in instructional design. So here you go, another competency. While in delivering 60% only of the planned training programs, the competency identified here is establishing partnership with stakeholders. And as part of the outcome of this performance appraisal meeting, the three people agreed on the priority of the development. So high on effective budgeting and negotiation skills, low on instructional design, and medium on establishing partnership with stakeholders, mainly internal stakeholders. So let's take one of those competencies, which is establishing partnership with stakeholders, and go down to further develop the IDP. Now, I kept a column for the rationale so we can really establish the link on how we chose this competency and not something else, because we could assign many competencies that can be developed in order to help this L&D manager to achieve 90% of the implementation of the training programs. So what happened during this year? Most of the time, schedule was not suitable for attendees. Things were getting a little bit personal, so line managers were not sending their employees to training, canceling training last minute. And you know, in business environments, when things get personal, unfortunately, some of those hidden conflicts might reveal themselves this way, or the managers are not responsive to the L&D manager, so they don't give him time to meet with them. They keep on postponing those meetings. They don't respond to emails, to phone calls, etc. And I don't know whether you have experienced same struggles with some line managers, but all this will result in a failure in implementing the training programs that have been planned in the beginning of the year. So when we talk about the competency of establishing partnership with stakeholders, we can really divide this competency into some development areas and development activities. So what we would like this manager to undergo, first in terms of conflict management, to be able to resolve the conflicts that are happening between him and the line managers, we really need to make sure that this person can understand the basics of conflict management and describes the behaviors that could come forward. Now, if we had a competency framework, those behaviors would be listed right away. And here I showed several ways that can be used exclusively or mutually to develop the deep knowledge of conflict management, like training courses, like reading material, like a video library that are now available online at very affordable prices. So all of this would build the knowledge, okay, the knowledge of this learning and development manager, and hopefully will initiate a change in behavior when he or she faces some conflicts with line managers. Another activity that this L&D manager needs to go to is attending business units meetings regularly in order to understand work dynamics. Why is that? Because sometimes he might schedule some courses during peak working time. Like no one would, if you work in an organization, you would never target an accounting department by the end of a quarter. You know for sure that they wouldn't attend. They wouldn't even attend the funeral of a beloved one during those times. So how come you go and schedule a training around those days? It's not gonna happen. For sure it's not gonna happen. All right. You go and schedule trainings in the middle of January for leaders, everyone sitting there trying to draft their business plan. It's not gonna happen. However, what we know from experience is that HR department is sometimes becoming isolated from the business. And that's why this development activity is uh, simply to attend business units meetings regularly to understand the business dynamics and really schedule training around those needs. So you might think, oh, is this too simple for a development activity? No, in fact, because it's going to be monitored. And this is very famous tool. It's called exposure. This can be a conference, it can be meetings, it can be uh, a branch visit, anything that would make this L&D manager gain business acumen. And the third and complementary uh, development activity would be receiving coaching on trust and empathy on the job from an assigned coach, because the only way to re-establish responsiveness from line management is by showing empathy and developing a trust-based relationship. So these are the activities. Certainly, the coach will be able to draft a coaching plan and insert it in the development log of the employee. And if you're lucky enough to have a formal coaching and mentoring program established in your organization, then this would be very easy. And as a result, we need a measure or an evidence of development to make sure that the IDP has been successfully implemented. What we would like to see by the end of 2021 is a decrease of 20% in cancellation of trainings monitored quarterly. So we will monitor this number quarterly in order to make sure that whatever kind of conflict management behaviors are used towards resolving such scheduling conflicts. We would also like to have an increase in 25% of attendance in the training programs. So I wouldn't like to have a training program as an in-house ran only for 3 people because the other 10 couldn't come and canceled last minute. Now, in terms of responsiveness from line managers, this is a little bit tricky, but with the help of the coach, this is what needs to be monitored. You need to monitor whether every meeting request sent by this L&D manager is booked within 2 weeks from sending date. And that's Very important. It's measurable and it can tell you right away whether this improvement is happening. It's numerical, and as you can see, do you think it's easy to monitor this kind of logs? It's not easy. And that's why we were saying we would love to have IDPs for everyone in the organization, but as a matter of fact, this is in practice is a little bit difficult. Now, another indicator is I need any kind of reply to emails sent from an L&D of the L&D manager to business unit managers or line managers within 3 business days. I don't like them to see an email from him or her and say, oh my God, I'm gonna just ignore this email. I'm gonna claim that I never received it. So the coaching, as you can see, this plan needs a timeline. So all the training course or the reading material or any knowledge acquisition should happen in Q1. Then through 2021, the exposure plan needs to happen, and the coaching also should be received in the quarter number 1 to make sure that we are monitoring the change in behavior. I have 2 questions. Rustam is asking whether coaching services by managers are included in leadership development programs. They might be for sure, but you need to make sure that you equip their direct managers with the right coaching skills. Albert is asking who should measure or I mean, maybe you mean monitor those development indicators. Certainly, the measurement and monitor needs to be by the direct manager, as you mentioned, Albert. However, they need to keep a log and records for us as HR to follow up on the development activities. All right, I hope I answered your questions, gentlemen, hopefully. Now, so this was an example on performance-based IDP design. Now, if we have, for example, a competency framework, and we have a certain business unit manager that has to develop his coaching and leadership competency. As you can see, in this case, I don't have to do the rationale. I don't have to to undergo the validation, because we really know that this is a competency gap, and by design of the framework itself, we know that those competencies are required. Muhammad is asking if we have the training needs for the employees, can we make the IDPs based on the training needs? In fact, Muhammad, you're perfectly right. IDPs are another form of training needs analysis, but they are in-depth training needs analysis targeted towards a special group or population of the organization where you need to have dedicated focus. Now, in some organizations, the training needs can be done high level. They don't go much deep in those areas. Especially if you have a good performer, someone who's reaching their objectives, and honestly, they have no plans for growth, so you don't really have to dig really deep into that much effort and resources in developing IDPs, monitoring IDPs, measuring IDPs, as you can see, and as you can tell from Albert's question, that it's going to be it's going to be lots of time. All right. So as an example, again, if you have the competencies set in place, then you can just be very creative in designing the action to be taken as a blend. So remember, it's always a blend of learning activities as we defined in the beginning. So this business unit manager would have to attend a people development and team leadership workshop by March 2021, which falls under the category of standard learning. And to make sure that we have a knowledge acquisition, we would give this employee a post-assessment on the knowledge acquired, and this assessment will be done by the L&D manager as an assessor. So you can see there are some differences in the templates. This manager also needs to do on-the-job practice of setting stretched competencies in business goals for 2021 for direct reports with guidance from the performance manager in the organization. They should be set by Jan 2021, and it should be a 20% stretch compared to last year competencies. And here again, we are on the job developing the competencies of goal setting and setting motivational objectives for subordinates through the coaching done by the performance manager. We would also make sure that there are feedback meetings happening bi-weekly with all the direct reportees to ensure the achievement of their Q1 objectives. Now, certainly you are asking yourself, oh my God, I'm gonna ask a business unit manager to meet every 2 weeks with his or her direct subordinates to give them feedback. Well, certainly. But let me ask you a question. We said in the beginning, we might target 3 populations: high potential employees, successors for key positions, or poor performers. In the case of this business unit manager, where do you think he or she would fall? In which category? Please write it down on the chat just to discuss it. Is it in high potential, successor, or poor performer? Most probably, just take a guess. Muhammad is saying he might be a successor. All right. Mu'taz is saying poor performer. Aoud is saying a poor performer. I would say he's more of a poor performer because, as you see, this is a very intense Q1 development plan. So certainly it can tell you that there's something wrong happening. Alan is asking whether you can get the templates or the whole PowerPoint maybe, and certainly I would be very happy to share those with you. In fact, this is part of the contribution. Abir is asking, what's the difference between performance improvement programs and individual development plans? Abir, the PIP is a program. So it is a solution designed there in the organization to deal with poor performance. IDP is a tool that you use in PIP and other development programs to ensure the development of competencies. Sure. So this is as we said, another example. Now, as you can see, there was a blend of many learning solutions, some forced meetings, some exposure meetings, some reading, some coaching on the job, some on the job training. Maybe you can involve projects, anything, assignments, having some own development. So there are lots of things. And this kind of blend is now recommended by the RBL group to be on the 50-30-20, unlike the 70-20-10 that we used to know. And this is by our dearest uh, group that is really involved in L&D practice. So now we're saying that the formal kind or standard kind of training needs to take not 10%, but 30% of the whole blend, because this is a more healthy blend that would give the right foundations for development. And to just wrap up with some very important notes and closing tips, please always focus to make sure that every individual development plan is initiated by the employee and developed in partnership with this employee, because this is a key towards the commitment. I don't want the IDP to be only an Excel sheet or a system on a certain software. I want it to be implemented. It is designed by HR and it is monitored always by the line manager. So please make sure that you involve always those three stakeholders within the process of uh, designing, developing, and implementing individual development plans. And some closing tips. First, always engage the employees in their development plan. Never impose a development plan. Rather, sell the development plan. Show them the benefits of their development plan very transparently, for sure, but never impose learning. Learning is never imposed. Okay, it can never happen as a like an enforcement on adults. This is an adult learning principle. Second, make sure you train line managers on the skill of designing those IDPs or writing those IDPs, because this means that you will be able to reach a larger population. Three, always be available for support, especially in the beginning, because what seems second nature for you, what seems very easy for you, like being able to find a measure to a certain behavior, is not obvious at all for a line manager. This is what we do as HR people as bread and butter. It's our daily cup of tea, as we say. But for line managers who do it from one year to the other, this is not obvious. So you need always to be available. Four, you will, if you see that this is a new initiative, my practical recommendation is to implement it for a select group and not for the whole organization. Make a success story, learn from the mistakes, systemize, write it as a procedure, and then go ahead and enlarge the scope of the initiative. And finally, always go measurable. Always feed those numbers, monitor the numbers. As you can see in the examples that I shared before, there are always some measures or evidence of improvement, evidence of development that we need to provide in order to display the success of the individual development plans. This brings us, ladies and gentlemen, to the end of this webinar. We took all the 1 hour, and I hope you enjoyed your time and you took some hands-on benefits. I would allow 5 additional minutes if you would like to share some questions. In the meantime, I would share my email with you. So if you would like to receive a copy of the slides, or if you have uh, any additional requests that you would like regarding this topic or any related topic, please feel free to get in touch. I would also share my mobile number. So if you don't like email conversations, you just can give me a call. And this is how I spell my name. If you would like to get in touch on LinkedIn, I would be very happy to connect with you. And this way you will know of our upcoming webinars. A final word would be about some opportunities that I would like to invite you to take part of, that are offered by Merck Training and Consulting and are within this area of the webinar. The first very nice and practical course is Certified Training and Development Professional. It's offered on both virtual learning and face-to-face basis. If you would like to attend it and get certified as a training and development professional. And another course that I would like to suggest is a newly launched course. It's called Managing Your Internal Training Academy. If you are an organization planning or in the process of launching an internal academy, we would be very glad to welcome you during this workshop. On that note, I would like to wish everyone a great remainder of the day. Stay safe, stay healthy. Make sure you always sanitize your hands. You wash your hands. Wear your own mask. Avoid public gatherings, maintain a physical distance, and may God grant all of us health and safety. Thank you very much. It has been a great pleasure. See you soon. Bye bye.
Merck.com